A guy was coming out of the store and thanked the clerk. The guy came out of the store and said that he bought everything that one person asked him, and now he can go back to the new house. The guy's name was Kazamachi Kunpei, and he's in his second year of high school, and he just moved to this city. Kazamachi was looking at a hefty mountain and said that it was visible from any point. A strong bolt of lightning struck the road. Kazamachi didn't understand what was going on because a second ago there wasn't even a cloud in the sky. Someone appeared on the road. The guy watched this closely. The silhouette was getting closer and closer. Then he was very close. Kazamachi couldn't figure out what that silhouette was. It was a beast that looked like a lion, but it spoke like a human. Kazamachi said that he was from the lion clan, and this was the first time he had ever seen such a thing in person. It was an anthropomorph. There are an unimaginable number of species in a guy's day. 42 years ago, Earth encountered an unusual world. From here, the joint life of people with the outlandish population of that world begins. And to be more precise, the anthropomorphs are just one of the clans, and there are a lot of species within it. The lion ran and asked for help. Kazamachi couldn't believe that this was the king of beasts. There was no dignity in him. He ran and shouted about being killed somewhere. The guy didn't understand what could have scared him so much. Someone's hands were visible behind the guy. A girl approached Kazamachi and asked for his help. She said her children were abducted. The guy didn't understand who was kidnapped. The girl said that they were abducted from the lion clan. Kazamachi asked her again if it was the one who had just started running. The girl said it was him. The guy looked at the girl and asked if she was okay. The girl screamed that if she hadn't been such a coward, nothing would have happened. Kazamachi asked her to calm down. He couldn't tell which clan she was from. It had horns, wings, and a tail. Kazamachi gathered his thoughts. I decided that this wasn't the time for that. The guy took off his denim jacket and covered the girl. He calmed her down and told her that his name was Kazamachi Kunpei. And then I asked what the girl's name was. She looked the guy in the eye and said her name was Doi. Kazamachi told Doi that he would run after the kidnapper. And then the guy gave the girl a phone number and told her to call the police. Doi stood with her phone in her hands and said that she understood everything. In the distance, Kazamachi was shouting to Doi that he would come back. The guy saw the target. Everything was normal for him, and he knew that he would definitely catch up with him. Kazamachi decided to activate divine speed. He was running. Very fast. No one could catch him. The girl looked after the guy. She thought it was incredible. And then she was all alone. The guy climbed onto the car with all his strength and began to jump over it. The driver of the car shouted at the guy, did not understand what he was doing, and said that the guy wanted to die. As soon as Kazamachi jumped over the van, the driver started yelling at the guy not to do any bullshit. Lev saw the guy again. Kazamachi shouted for the lion to return his children and called him a thief. Lev said that the guy is an ordinary human and he can't do anything. Then he told Kazamachi to get lost. Kazamachi said he couldn't let a thief like him go. Lev couldn't believe that the guy considered himself his equal and called him an impudent fellow. The lion clan started waving their fists at the guy. The guy dodged and hit the lion's jaw. The clan fell. Kazamachi noticed that his hands were covered in blood, and he realized that he must have cut himself on the back of the van. And then the guy realized that he had to quickly pick up the children. They were in a bundle. Kazamachi hoped that they would be safe and sound. When the guy opened the package, he didn't understand. In the pile were some eggs that looked like rocks. Kazamachi got his blood on the eggs. My balls began to throb, and then crackle. Kazamachi was afraid that they were about to hatch. Doi was also shocked. The girl said they never wanted to hatch, no matter what Doi did. Kazamachi asked me what it was. Doi didn't understand how he did it. The guy didn't know what was going on or what he had done. Doi wanted her babies to hatch as soon as possible. Kazamachi didn't understand what kind of situation this was. She wanted it to continue like this. She focused on the eggs. The eggs began to crack. Doi's eyes were wet as she waited for the babies to arrive. Babies emerged from 2 eggs. Doi was very happy to have these kids. They looked like cute girls. It happened right in front of Kazamachi's hands. The guy asked Doi to pick them up. Doi was crying. She was very happy. After all, when the children disappeared from the nest, the girl thought that she would never see them again. But when they were found, she was insanely happy. She hugged the children and was very happy that they were with her now. Kazamachi asked for a second. He took off his jacket and put the children in it. It's like they're warm. The girl thanked the guy. Doi picked up the children, but the little ones were drawn to Kazamachi. The girl asked to hold the children. Kazamachi didn't understand why. And then the guy decided to take them after all. They looked like little warm lumps. Doi thought it was wonderful that they are in the hands of the Pope. Kazamachi didn't understand what Doi had just said. He thought he was imagining things. The guy asked the girl if it was his imagination, and if he heard correctly. The girl said she didn't really introduce herself, and she said her name was Doinon Dragoline, and she was a sky dragon. Kazamachi asked if they were her children. Doi replied that she did. The girl said that her children really love their daddy. Kazamachi realized that he hadn't imagined it after all. Kazamachi Kunpei, 17 years old. He just moved in and already managed to become a dad. Somewhere far away sat a mouse. She was saying that the heavens far to the east were in a good mood. After 250 years, a new dragon appeared. The mouse asked to go immediately to one girl, because she said that there is no way to do without her. After all, over time, this is the first purebred dragon, and this is a wonderful event, because a dragon is not so easy to be born. Then the girl said that she was moving forward. Police. Officer Dogi also asked the guy about his claim that the girl's eggs were stolen. And then I asked her if she wasn't confusing anything. Kazamachi sat and said that this is not quite true, because the girl asked to save the children from the thief. The officer asked the guy that he jumped on the truck without a shadow of a doubt, caught up and knocked out the criminal. The guy said something like that. After contacting the police, a car was sent to them. And so it just so happened that, trying to understand the situation, Kazamachi's interrogation was taken up properly. Her assistant approached the officer and said that hospitals would not help them, and no matter how hard anyone searches, dragon children will not be accepted anywhere. The officer said it couldn't be helped. Kazamachi asked about the problems with the dragons. The officer asked him what he didn't know. After all, about 10 years ago there was an incident, approximately somewhere in northern Europe. A dragon went to the dentist with tooth pain caused by tooth decay. Kazamachi was surprised that dragons could have such a virulent bacterium. The doctor thought that he could quickly cure it, but the drill just broke on the dragon's tooth. With each failed attempt, the dragoness became angrier and angrier. It got to the point where she took and destroyed the clinic to the ground. The guy didn't believe that could be the case. The officer said that one clinic after another was destroyed after the dragon's arrival. The officer heard that there were about 150 of them. Even though it was a dragon, no one was injured. The assistant officer said that because of these situations, there is a perception that a patient from the dragon clan is a lost cause. Kazamachi didn't understand why he couldn't accept this state of affairs. The officer apologized to Dragoline and said they couldn't help. The girl said that the children are sleeping and therefore everything is still normal. The kids quickly fell asleep. The assistant officer said that despite that impressive bolt of lightning, there was almost no damage. He said that Kazamachi should be more careful, but nevertheless the girl and the guy were released. This was a relief to Kazamachi. The officer said that the investigation will not end there, and she asked the guy to share his contact details. The officer asked Doi where she lived. The girl said that she lives in the nest. Then the girl was asked where it is located. But at the same time, they did not force us to say this because the DPI may have some rules about non-disclosure or protection of this information. Doi replied that she was at the top of that huge rock. Everyone was shocked that she was on Fang Rock. The officer said that she grew up in this city, but she didn't even know about it. After all, there aren't many people outside who can climb it, and inside it is made as a dungeon. Kazamachi asked again. He didn't believe that there was a real dungeon in this city. The guy first heard about it and realized that he lives in an amazing city. The girl said that it wasn't a dungeon and that things were different at the top of the cliff. The kids started screaming in their sleep. Doi and Kazamachi apologized for speaking so loudly. The officer thought about this case and realized that the criminal knew where the dragons live, and he slowly made his way up to get the dragon treasures. The officer said that the same scales, eggs, or something like a dragon blood stone are highly valued. Doi couldn't understand what the dragon blood stone meant. The officer said that this is an incredibly valuable stone that has appeared on sale only a few times in recent decades. It was a one-of-a-kind dark red gemstone. Red and oval. They say it was found in a dragon's nest. Doi said that they start laying eggs during the breeding season. However, most of the eggs never show signs of life, and soon they turn red. But Doi doesn't really like to throw them out. So she puts them in her nest, where they still lie. The officer said she shouldn't have known. And later, she said that her father was coming for Kazamachi, and he would be there soon. The guy hoped he wasn't going to get into trouble. The kids started screaming. Doi realized that the boys were already awake. The children screamed harder and harder. Doi didn't know what to do. The guy asked me to hold one. The girl was happy with this offer and told the kids that Daddy was nearby. Kazamachi realized that it was time to talk about this daddy thing. Kazamachi started asking Doi about how it was that he became a father after seeing a girl for the first time. Doi asked the guy to forget about it and take the baby in his arms. The guy picked her up. He asked the child what was wrong and whether he really had a terrible dream. The girl started screaming again. Kazamachi didn't understand how such a little girl could make so much noise. The officer asked if they might be hungry. After all, one place doesn't seem to smell. Doi looked at the children. And then I asked the guy what the kids eat. The guy said that human children drink one thing and nothing else can be. Doi told the guy that they were dragons and then asked what the guy meant by that thing. Kazamachi asked the officer if he was right. The officer began to tell the guy not to be shy, because he also drank milk when he was little. The officer said that anthropomorphs like humans are fed with their mother's milk at the beginning of life. And this is breast milk. Doi looked at the officer and couldn't understand him at all. The girl looked at the guy. Kazamachi didn't understand why she was staring at him. And then I asked Kazamachi if her breast milk would come out. The guy didn't understand why she was asking him this. The girl told Kazamachi that nothing ever came out of her chest in her life. He didn't know how he knew that. And he said that there is no one in life who is less aware of this than he is. Something in Kazamachi's head was telling Doi to control herself. The guy didn't understand what was going on and whose voice was coming out of his ear. And then someone got out and apologized for keeping me waiting. It was a mouse that was very happy with Doi. She called the girl the dearest sky dragon. There was a mouse sitting on Kazamachi's shoulder. The guy didn't understand what was going on. The mouse asked to admire the girl. Kazamachi asked who he was and what was going on. Meanwhile, the mouse asked the guy not to shout in his ear. Doi saw her uncle in the mouse, and the officer looked at this beast, and she couldn't believe her words. It was the legendary sage Alba Hermine. Kazamachi asked the officer if she knew the beast. Then the officer began to tell the guy that just like any other anthropomorph, she was surprised that she was able to see the sage of the anthropomorph machine. Alba said that his pride was great, unlike his height. In order to satisfy his curiosity, he decided to say right away that he was from the long-haired mouse clan. And then the beast said that it was better to talk not about him, but about the baby. When Alba looked at the baby, he saw that they were twins. One was the older sister, who looked just like Doi, born with the spirit of a thunder dragon, and one was a younger sister. So she went to Kazamachi. The guy was in shock. Alba said that this girl was given the power of the mighty wind. Kazamachi still had a lot of questions. Alba told the guy that if there is 100 questions to ask, then let the guy ask and the sage will answer. Alba told Doi to feed the children milk because crying wouldn't do them any good. Then the girl asked how to do it at all. The sage replied that everything was fine and her instincts would tell her. The officer said she would prepare the partition. The assistant officer also decided to help. After a while, the girls were invited to go to a closed place. Kazamachi stopped the girl and told her to take the younger one. Alba said that the guy is also going with the girl. The guy said he didn't need to be there. The mouse told the guy to take off his jacket, but Kazamachi wasn't happy about it. The sage told the guy to listen to him and take off his jacket. The guy didn't understand why. The mouse became angry and told the guy to do it faster. A little later, Alba slipped under the guy's jacket. Kazamachi shouted and told Mouse that his milk would definitely not go. The sage began to shout and say that he did not say a word about it. But the guy didn't believe it because the mouse asked him to undress. The mouse said that if Kazamachi could just hang out with someone like a nurse, then the matter was closed. And then he added and said that even more so, the guy is the father of children. Kazamachi shouted and said that he wasn't their father. He said that he only met Doi today and said that he might not be proud of it, but he didn't touch any girls except Mom. The guy didn't like the pathetic things he was saying. The sage told Kazamachi that he was without a doubt their father. Kazamachi was not happy that Alba rejected the boy's rumors. But the sage himself replied that it was a long time to explain, and he would rather talk elsewhere. Doi started calling out to the guy and calling out to him. Then she told Kazamachi that her uncle was never wrong about taking care of dragons and asked the boy to do as the sage asked. Kazamachi agreed, but he still didn't understand why. The sage said that it is faster to do than to chew everything, and then he asked the guy for forgiveness. Kazamachi didn't understand what was going on. He hoped it wouldn't hurt because he didn't know what Doi was up to. The naked Doi sat down with her back to Kazamachi's back. The guy shouted and talked about whether it was absolutely necessary to sit naked back to back. Alba says that there is nothing wrong with this and asked the guy to be quiet for a moment. The mouse asked Kazamachi to behave calmly on the first date, but he didn't know how. Doi said that the eldest girl would be the first. Kazamachi was shocked by the effort she was making to drink. Doi was shocked that the milk was actually coming out. And then it was the youngest's turn. Doi invited the guy to move a little to the side. Kazamachi was very angry and didn't understand what it was. The girl looked at her babies and said that it was amazing because her babies drink breast milk. She thought it was cute. And after a while, there was some danger. Kazamachi had the feeling that something very important inside of him had broken down. The sage told the girl that it looked like there was nothing wrong with her milk and that her babies looked healthy and pretty. Kazamachi waited for Alb to explain why he was the father of these babies and how he got into this whole situation. The sage said that he would tell you because he has the right to do so. The mouse also added that from now on, Kazamachi will help Doi with this every day. The guy wasn't happy about this information, just like the girl herself. Kazamachi didn't understand what it was like every day. Alba said that all he had to do was do it until they got used to milk. Doi decided that they were too hard on the guy and said that it was better to let it be once every 3 days. But Alba did not agree with her words and said that it should be done every day, period. Anyway, the guy asked for an explanation and wanted to get it. The sage was asking Kazamachi what he wanted to ask. The guy calmly clenched his fist and first decided to find out how he turned out to be the father of the children. Doi told the guy that the babies were hatched thanks to the guy. Kazamachi did not believe this and said that the father was the one who impregnated them. The girl didn't understand what fertilized meant. The guy told the girl that she really didn't know anything. The sage sat on the boy's shoulder and talked about how there were no males in the dragon clan. Kazamachi didn't understand how. Since ancient times, only female individuals have existed in the world. Alba had seen all the dragons, including the progenitors, but even so, he hadn't met a single male. The guy was wondering how the babies were born. Alba replied that it was a matter of course. This is called energy release, something similar to fission. Even if the dragon lays eggs, only a few of them will receive life force, which is why most of the units remain that way. Now Kazamachi understood what the dragon blood stone was. The conditions for the life force to flow into the egg are also extremely difficult. And to do this, Kazamachi must wholeheartedly wish to have a child and nothing else. In other words, Doi wanted children, and that's why it happened. The girl said that she was lonely alone, and she wanted more than children to be close to someone. Since birth, and for 200 years, the girl lived with her mother, but after that time, the sky dragons should become independent. However, despite this, Doi behaved like a spoiled child, and I asked my mother to put it off for another 10 years. Kazamachi didn't know how old the girl was. Doi said she was about 250. The guy was shocked with the fact that the girl is older than him. The sage told Kazamachi that dragons live a very long time. However, Kazamachi realized that the girl lived independently for 40 years and all this time she was alone. The girl said it was true. Until 6 months ago, something happened. Before that, she cried at night, lived on her own, and was lonely. Kazamachi asked the girl what had happened to her then. Doi replied that she saw a guy. And this is the second time. Kazamachi didn't know when she'd made it. DPI replied that only once 6 months ago. The guy began to remember what happened 6 months ago. The guy doesn't remember anything like that because he definitely wouldn't be able to forget such a beautiful girl. Doi replied that Kazamachi had come to see them with his dad and little sister. Kazamachi recalled that they had actually briefly gone for it. That day, my father shouted something to the guy. When Kazamachi started asking his father why he was shouting like that, his father replied that a moment ago there was an incredibly beautiful girl on the side. Kazamachi replied that Dad had said something like that. On that occasion, Doi had come down from Fang Mountain to do some shopping. And it just so happened that the girl saw Kazamachi in the garden. He was laughing with his younger brother. Doi looked at it all and envied it. Kazamachi realized that his family reminded her of her loneliness. And even without doing anything at all, the guy still felt responsible. The sage shouted that this was it. The guy asked the mouse if he could feel the atmosphere. The sage sat and said that he understood everything. And it was he who said that this is the answer. This is the answer to why the eggs hatched in the guy's hands. Doi didn't understand what the sage was talking about. Elab told them to forget everything he had said before about having children. But all this time, he was somehow uneasy at heart. And then he wanted to get back to the subject. And he said that Doi really wanted it with all her heart. And the moment she wanted someone to be near the girl, she imagined the face of the children's father. Strong emotions were able to infuse vitality into the eggs. Naturally, the twins also inherited her feelings. They stayed in the egg because they were waiting for Kazamachi, because he's their daddy. And then Alba asked about what their behavior didn't tell the guy about how real they are to you. There is every reason to believe why only one of you is helping with feeding. The guy was waiting for this explanation. And all the explanations go to the fact that all because of Kazamachi, because they are what they are, because they were born under the influence of man. And so, the guy is an integral element. And by element, we mean immunity. They can't get human immunity through DPI, after all. And for that, she needs Kazamachi. The guy still couldn't understand anything. He asked Alb that they needed human immunity every day. The sage replied that it was so. The guy asked Alba what would happen if they didn't get it. The mouse said that she couldn't say for sure, because this was the first time they had ever been infected, but they might catch some kind of infection or die in the worst-case scenario. Doi hugged her kids. The girl began to apologize to Kazamachi for dragging him into this. The guy replied that he could feel the heat in the place where their backs were touching. The girl prayed that the guy would help her for the sake of the children. Kazamachi replied that he had met the girl only a few hours ago at best, but she had nothing to apologize for and let her not think about it. The guy understood that 2 small lives depended on him, and Doi has become a mother, and she has every right to do so. The girl didn't understand the guy. Kazamachi replied that he would try. The voice in the guy's head constantly made him angry, and he didn't like it. Kazamachi told Doi to tell her when she was done feeding the kids. Before Doi could say anything, the guy had already quickly moved away from her back. The mother and father stood waiting for their son. Kazamachi asked them how long they had been here. My father said they were there from the moment he went through the partition. The parents realized that their son was busy, so they waited for him like mice, sat and listened attentively. Brother Kazamachi didn't understand how this happened because he was just sent on business. My father said the officer had told him everything. So the situation with the young lady, the father seems to represent. The girl bowed to her father and said that her name was Doinong, and she was very grateful to Kunpei-san for his help. The father said that he was relieved that the children were safe and that they would work together from now on. The father said that these children were his grandchildren, and therefore it couldn't be any other way. Afterward, my father said that it was best for the young lady to live with them. Kazamachi was very angry and didn't understand what was going on. Her father replied that Doi lived on Mount Fang, and that it would be difficult for her to come down from there every day while carrying her children. The officer said that she also thought it would be best, because the thief had once visited the nest, and therefore it would be dangerous for the babies there. The assistant officer said that dragon treasure seekers have also been wandering into the dungeon more often lately. Just like that, unanimously, with the exception of the person who directly participated in it. In the blink of an eye, the decision to live together was made. The girl was sitting in her room, and Kazamachi wanted to enter. Doi thanked the guy for lending him a bed. Later, she asked him where he was going to sleep. Kazamachi asked me not to worry about it. I asked Doi about the names of the babies. The girl said that she still decided on the names when the babies were still in the eggs. The older one is called Nana, and the younger one is called Jaja. Doi said she named them after legendary dragons. Kazamachi said they were great names. Doi couldn't believe the guy liked the names. Kazamachi replied that he would do his best to take care of Judge and Nana. Doi was very glad that it was Kazamachi she was thinking of. The younger sister saw Kazamachi coming down the stairs. She asked him if he had slept well. But I saw his appearance, and he looked terrible. And with such a face, the road to the department is reserved. Kazamachi didn't understand why. The little sister replied that with such a face, the guy would definitely arouse suspicion. Kazamachi said it wouldn't be fair to get arrested for being a babysitter. My little sister told my brother that he looked very exhausted and asked if he was all right. Kazamachi replied that he was not all right because he had no idea that children could cry like that. My sister called the kids problematic. Last night, the guy just dropped off to take a nap from daytime connections. How Doi started calling him. She screamed for help. Kazamachi was afraid it was the kidnappers again. But Doi screamed for help because the kids couldn't calm down. No matter how hard she tried, they kept crying, and she didn't know what to do. Kazamachi suggested that we go to the kids' house together. There was very loud crying. The guy realized that they were really roaring. Kazamachi was shocked that they were screaming like crazy. He wasn't surprised that Doi panicked about it. The guy decided to check the diapers, but it was dry. Doi said that she had only recently changed it and fed them milk, and they were still crying. Kazamachi picked up one baby and asked why it was crying so much. The kids were so energetic. My father was looking at them. Kazamachi saw him and apologized for waking him up. My father said that everything was normal and that it was common for children to cry at night. For my father, it was nostalgic. But the guy said that Dad should not ask for memories, but rather help. The father asked to give the baby to him. The father told the kid that he was a grandfather, and slowly began to rock the baby. After a while, the baby calmed down. Doi was as shocked as Kazamachi himself. The father said that there were two babies, and when one cried, the other would immediately catch up. Twins need to be cradled separately, but at the same time. After a while, the kids quieted down. My father said they could hold their heads up now. In human children, this comes out only after 6 months, and that's when they start crying at night. This was the first time Kazamachi had heard of it. Doi asked if it would be every night. My father said that they could cry in the morning or at lunchtime because they didn't care when they cried. At their age, do children know how to sleep, eat, and cry? Doi asked what they should do. My father replied that they should accept it and be more patient because they had no other choice. Kazamachi replied that getting enough sleep wouldn't be easy. Doi said that just in case, the girl would ask Grandpa Mouse about it, or else every night would be a challenge. Kazamachi asked if they were all girls, but my father said that wasn't the case at all. The guy asked that it turns out that you can forget about the dream. My father replied that it was true. My father said that the worst thing is when they cry every hour, and it even happens that the crying does not stop for 2-3 hours in a row. And it would be better if they thought not how to avoid the screams, but how to quickly calm them down. After all, only by crying can children say that they need something. Doi decided it was true. My father said that he could advise me to change diapers more often and not forget about constant feeding, and also the rhythm. Kazamachi couldn't understand what rhythm was. When human babies are inside the mother, the heartbeat serves as a kind of lullaby. They calm down when they hear this rhythm or something similar to it. The father said to hug the children so they could hear their heartbeats. Rhythmic pats on the back can also help. And then my father asked me if they'd done it before. Kazamachi said he remembered everything. My father said that if anything happened, he might be woken up. Kazamachi thanked the guy and said that with his help, he would not be lost. As expected, the advice of a seasoned father bore fruit. Doi knew they could rely on their father. Kazamachi replied that he would be on the first floor, and if she couldn't handle it alone, she could call him. The guy got into bed and decided to leave the door open just in case. Before Kazamachi could fall asleep, the kids started screaming again. The guy came running to help. And then he took the baby again and began to calm him down. After a while, the kids fell asleep. Kazamachi offered to sleep next to Doi and the kids, because then he wouldn't have to run around the house. Doi told Kazamachi to stay, and so the battle began. Judge's player is crying for the 5th time that night. The last one was 45 minutes ago. The second child began to scream too. Intrepid gambler Nana is also fired up. I think the game will be unforgettable. The girl didn't understand what Kazamachi was talking about. The guy said he was already falling off his feet. Doi replied that everything was fine. Kazamachi didn't think that life without sleep was so hard. He said he should have listened carefully to old Alba. Dragons seemed to be a long-lived species, as if then the period would not drag on for decades. The baby was hungry. The girl realized this and decided to take the baby. Doi sat down and decided to pick up the baby. Kazamachi saw the girl's naked body and told her to think with her head. Meanwhile, Doi knitted the baby and said it was time for her to eat. Nana woke up and started screaming. And later they began to calm her down and she fell asleep. It was obvious that she was already beginning to feel sleepy, and the other sister actually began to repeat after the other. Kazamachi already knew what was going on. Kazamachi replied that Jaja was hungry and started starving because of it. Doi didn't understand why the kids were crying so much, since it was the first day after all. Kazamachi suggested just getting some sleep. Before they could fall asleep, the kids started screaming again. And so, the crying subsided only in the morning, and Kazamachi and Doi slept for at most 4 hours. My sister asked if he could stand it without sleep. Kazamachi said he didn't think so, but the kids were already awake. Kazamachi was only happy that it was spring break. And then he asked if his father had run away to work. The nurse replied that he had left and given Kazamachi something. It was a credit card for the guy to buy everything he needed for the kids. Kazamachi replied that he would go for a walk with Doi and the kids after lunch. But the guy didn't know where it was fashionable to buy all this stuff because he still didn't know the city very well. My sister suggested we go to the mall that opened that year. A little far away, but with the size of at least where Kazamachi replied that he could buy most of the necessities there. The mall was right next to the old house. Kazamachi decided that he would be able to see people he knew, although he figured they might not even try to talk. His sister asked him when he had made friends. Kazamachi replied that he would go and tell Doi everything, and then it will be time to see old acquaintances. There were students at some school. One of the students asked a girl named Yuno if she was depressed. The girl said she wasn't depressed. And the other one started talking about Yuna sighing all the time and told her to forget about Kazamachi and his kind. The girl suggested that Yuna go shopping. Una shouted at the girl named Ikakachin to take her time. Kazamachi came to the mall to buy baby products. Doi was shocked that it was huge and she didn't want to get lost here. Kazamachi looked at where the children's goods were located. They were on the second floor, but he didn't know how to get them there. Doi saw something. It was a huge flower arch. One of the little girls wanted to touch the flowers. Doi looked at it and thought it was very cute. One of the little girls who was sitting on Doi's arm began to bite her mother. The girl began to tell the baby that this is not mummy's breast. But later, Doi added that with her size, any part of the baby's body is like a breast. Kazamachi asked why the girl hung her head. Doi said she was just thinking. And then the guy suggested to go. First, they will need to buy a stroller to make shopping easier. Kazamachi didn't know how to choose a good one because there were so many strollers. After a while, the girl and the guy were approached by an aunt who was touched by the twins. The little girls were sleeping, and this aunt started asking Kazamachi if they were his little sisters. Doi said they were daughters. My aunt began to laugh and think that this boy was still a naughty boy. The guy could hear this aunt's thoughts, and he didn't like them. Half-breed anthropomorphs are all the rage now, and when my aunt looked at them, her eyes were happy. And then she started asking them if they liked anything. After a while, the couple left the store with a stroller. Kazamachi said that this aunt squeezed all the juice out of him. Doi agreed and said that they almost bought those expensive Italian strollers. He was glad that at least it was over. Kazamachi checked the time and offered Doi a bite to eat. Doi said they'd have something to eat as soon as the girl changed her diaper. Kazamachi said it was really wet. Doi said that Jaji's diaper is still dry, so the guy should sit here and wait for the girl. And Doi herself said that she would go to the nursery because she saw another mother go there. Kazamachi replied that she could take her time. The girl was walking and talking about how soon Nana will be clean. Meanwhile, Kazamachi decided to see what they had left to buy. It was clothing, baby food, milk bottles, and a bottle sterilizer. And the guy also said that the guy should consult with his father about the crib. Jaja took off and began to fly away. Kazamachi started shouting and looking for her. Jaja was flying. Kazamachi didn't believe she could fly. The guy was shouting at her to be a good girl and come down. The girl began to laugh and look for her father, and then went down. Kazamachi was angry at the girl who was laughing at the situation. But before she could reach Kazamachi's arms, she was blown away by the wind from the air conditioner. Kazamachi shouted to the guards that his daughter was flying away, and he couldn't help her. The security guard didn't understand how this could have happened because the shopping center has an anti-flight spell. Kazamachi couldn't understand anything and shouted for his daughter to be saved. The guard shouted that it was really serious. The security guard shouted about an emergency. He said that the security center needed emergency help in the lobby of the section on the second floor and needed to take mats and ladders. Kazamachi shouted that just a little bit more and he would let the baby down. Everyone was afraid for the baby because she would soon be able to fly into the lobby. The security guard shouted that the security center needed a mat in the lobby of the first floor since it was too late to carry it to the second floor. Kazamachi was shouting about Judge. The child was already in the lobby. The baby began to cry. Kazamachi shouted and said that everything was fine and Daddy would save him. The guard shouted that it was too dangerous. Kazamachi shouted and said that the child was scared and he would climb after her. Jaja screamed and cried. Kazamachi didn't understand what was wrong with her. He started asking the guards if the mat was ready. The guard said that the baby's strength was running out. Kazamachi was afraid for her daughter and did not understand why she was losing strength in such a place. The boy knew that the baby could fall at any second. The guard said to stay calm. The guy began to reason coolly, and he had no choice but to grab her. Kazamachi realized that he had to keep an eye on her and time her properly. And after some time, the guy grabbed the baby. The child began to cry, but the guy calmed her down. He said that everything was fine. Below, a girl was shouting that Kazamachi could let her go. The guy didn't know who it was, but the girl kept shouting that she was under Kazamachi and he could let the child go. And then the guy realized that he was about to let her go. The girl screamed that the guy let her go, that she caught him, and he cannot doubt it. The guy released the girl, and after a while she was caught. And then it was Kazamachi's turn. The guy jumped into the ball pool and started walking quickly towards Jaja. The girl was very scared. Kazamachi began to calm her down, saying that he understood how the girl was scared and that Daddy was to blame for everything. Later, Kazamachi was approached by a friend who was shocked by the situation and the flying child. Kazamachi recognized the girl as Siki. Siki told Kazamachi that Yunu had told people to bring a ball pool from the children's corner. Yunu replied that she just did what first occurred to her. Siki replied that she had never seen a girl run around like this in her life. Yunu started shouting and saying that she didn't know what the reason for all this was. Before long, Doi ran up to Kazamachi. She couldn't believe that she had walked away for a while and asked them if they were hurt. Kazamachi apologized and said that he had overlooked it, but everyone was fine. Doi was shocked that the little girl learned to fly so quickly, because Doi's mother said that the girl only learned it when she was a year old. Kazamachi replied that he would have to ask Alba about it. The girl replied that she would do so tomorrow. And then Doi saw two girls standing next to them and asked who they were. Kazamachi replied that they had saved Jaju, and they had known each other since junior high and were in the same class in high school. And you can call them childhood friends. One girl introduced herself as Miss Yumi Yunu, and the other said her name was Siki Ikika. Doi is grateful to the girls for saving Jaju. Siki said that it was nothing special, and Yunu told Doi not to worry about this situation. Doi whispered to herself about Kunpei's childhood friends. Kazamachi heard this, but decided not to show it. Yunu asked Doi what her name was. The girl said that she forgot to introduce herself, and her name is Doinon Dragaline Kazamachi. Siki thought about it and said that the guy doesn't have any younger sisters. And Yunu replied that there were no relatives either. He couldn't figure out how they knew that. Doi said she wasn't a sister or a relative. Kazamachi had a bad feeling about this. Dom replied that she was his wife. Siki was shocked to see a guy with such a little girl. Kazamachi said it wasn't like that at all. Yunu was shocked with this information. Kazamachi jokingly patted Doi's head and told her that she was a prankster. I asked her if they were related. But Doi screamed and said that she was his wife and her husband was always taking care of her. Yunu began to tell her story. She was in 6th grade at the time, and it was the last day of summer. At that time, she was still being bullied at school. And Yunu was crying, dreading the start of the 2nd semester. Yunu was approached by a boy who asked her what had happened. It was Kazamachi. Back then, Yunu and him and Ikika-chan were in different classes, so they didn't know what was going on with her. Yunu was glad that a boy had come up to her. And then she told me about a badass boy named Inagimukin. Kazamachi knew this guy. It was a fat man. Yunu came to the defense of the girl he bullied, and in the end, the girl was his target. Everyone was afraid of this boy. And fearing to fall under the distribution, Yunu's classmates began to avoid it. The bullying grew stronger and stronger, and Yunu's textbooks were hidden. And after replacing it, throw it in the trash. Yunu was panicking. But at the same time, the girl did not want to cause trouble to her parents who were busy at work. For a long time, the girl could not tell anyone about this. But due to the overwhelming emotions at that moment, Yunu didn't notice that she was telling everyone about Kazamachi. Another day came. Yunu wished everyone a good morning, but received no response. After that, everyone gathered in the hall. The opening ceremony was about to begin. Everyone was told to gather in the gym and line up with their class. No one saw Nagima-kun. Kazamachi stood and held the crying bully boy. All the children watched as Kazamachi carried Inaguma. Then they went up to the stage, where Kazamachi said that Inagam had something to say to everyone. The guy mumbled something, but Kazamachi didn't like it and told Inaguma to speak harsher or Kazamachi would kick him. Inaguma said that he would never touch Yumenu's Yuno again and would never bully her. And then I asked him if he was satisfied. Kazamachi slapped the bully and said that he didn't hear any remorse in his words. Someone shouted for them to get out of there. The director's office. Kazamachi Kunpei's father walked in. The director said that the father should sit down and explain everything, but the father himself said that he would listen to his son. My father approached Kazamachi and asked him what he had done and if it was bad. Kazamachi replied that he had done something wrong. Then the father clenched his fist and said that to his son, that he should understand what he was going to hit for now. And then there was a stroke. And the father pulled his son towards him with the words, "Why did he do this?" Kazamachi tearfully and angrily replied that this bully had no qualms about bullying others. My father asked if it was for someone else's sake. Kazamachi replied that it was out of personal dislike. After that, Yunu looked out of the door and asked her not to get mad at her. She replied that the guy did it for her. She screamed that it was all her fault. The director asked me to calm down and tell you everything in order. The director listened carefully to Yunu's story. For the next few days, he questioned his classmates one by one, and then revealed the truth about Inaguma-kun's bullying. The father said that his son's act was unforgivable, but he was guided by his own beliefs. And as a parent, a father trusts his child, and he is ready to pay all the necessary medical expenses. And then he offered his deepest apologies. The director agreed. Yunu thanked the guy and apologized. Kazamachi said it was fine. Kazamachi replied that he did it on a whim. Kazamachi-kun was so kind that Yunu cried even harder. After that, Inaguma often skipped school, and Yunu had heard that he had transferred out of high school altogether. Her classmates asked Yunu for forgiveness, and she returned to the classroom as if nothing had happened. However, for the next year, Kazamachi became the one that the entire school was wary of. Yunu wished him a good morning. And the girl decided that if Kazamachi was ever in trouble, she would definitely come to his aid. Siki, Yunu, and Doi were sitting at the table. Siki asked Kazamachi why he wasn't eating. The guy said he had no appetite. After the commotion with JGA, they were the center of attention, so they decided to go out and sort of eat together. But the atmosphere was too tense. The twins were asleep. Kazamachi looked at the babies and saw that Jajo was very tired. The guy couldn't forget what Doi had said. Despite her 250 years, she looks like a schoolgirl, and if someone decided that they say he forces her to be called his wife, then people will definitely think that they are looking at a natural pedophile and, moreover, who has conceived 2 children. Someone called out to the guy. It was Yunu who asked if he would explain everything. The boy swallowed. Kazamachi replied that a lot of things had happened. It's not hard to guess that because of the Ha-egg hunters, the human world is an extremely dangerous place for dragons, and it would be better to keep Doi's real identity a secret for both her and the twins' good. He couldn't tell that she was a dragon. Yunu understood that the childhood friend whom she tearfully saw off last month had made children for himself and was living with a girl who looked like an 8th grader. She didn't understand anything. Siki told him that even though she thought he often got into trouble, but he wasn't capable of it, but now she wasn't sure. And even Siki, as an old acquaintance, felt a little ashamed. Kazamachi replied that there was no such thing, and he was sure of it. Yunu asked Kazamachi if she had any reason not to tell her about this. Kazamachi replied that the children are like that because they are from the dragon species. Yunu said that some videos were uploaded yesterday, and then I showed it to Kazamachi and Doi. It was a video related to yesterday. Kazamachi knew that this was bad, because it turns out that someone was filming yesterday's incident. Yunu said that this is the area where he recently moved to. Kazamachi told the girl that it didn't mean anything at all. Siki began to say that the boy's eyes were moving faster and faster. Yunu said that there is a website where she sits. They publish checks of all sorts of myths and legends. She really likes fantasy stories and movies, so she often checks it out. Kazamachi said that when she was still in private school, she was very enthusiastic about telling this story, so he knows it. Yunyu was surprised that the guy hadn't forgotten that, and told him that he had a lot of emotions back then. And then Yunyu replied that they wrote that it was most likely a dragon. Kazamachi replied that it might have been a dragon, but he didn't understand what Doi had to do with it. Yunyu replied that they were in a public place, and they usually had an anti-flight spell cast on them. Siki replied that if it was allowed to fly here, a lot of things would start happening. Kazamachi asked Doi if she could fly. The girl replied that it was a little difficult for her to do this, but she could do it just a little bit. Yunyu replied that this is why it usually goes beyond a simple difficult, because the spell is controlled by a large number of magical devices. However, Jojo was flying. Doi replied that she could too, if she wanted to. The guy with a smile on his face thought that she was a braggart. But the ability to fly doesn't change much from species to species, and there is no mania that can surpass a spell of this magnitude except perhaps a military one. And this magic exists only for those who can fly or have strong magic, and so almost everywhere in a limited form and under strict control. The guy said that his head was already boiling. Yunyu replied that there is something that is completely different from the way they are used to flying, and that does not rely on the magical energy that underlies all magic. And the only species that can fly in this building is dragons. This is a special feature of the dragon species. When flying, they use the still unexplored energies of the spirit and dragons. Kazamachi replied that he was actually hooked on studying magic recently. And so even an uninformed person like Kazamachi can think of this, let alone experts. Yunyu didn't understand about the experts. Yunyu said that people who study dragon lore, ecology, and the like. At the same time, there are quite a lot of them. Still, dragons are rare and popular creatures. There's a chance that someone might have filmed the incident with Jeja, and it's only a matter of time before the truth comes to the surface. However, the guy didn't understand anything. Doi was very angry, and she was looking at Yunyu. Kazamachi asked why she was glaring at the girl. Doi angrily replied that she didn't want Kunpei-san to be taken away from her. Everyone was shocked by her words. Yunyu didn't understand what Doi wanted from her. Siki said that everything happens just like in magazines and books. Girls with big breasts immediately seduce guys. Kazamachi thought it sounded like he was being seduced by Yunui's breasts. But the guy also added that if you compare with the junior school, they have grown up pretty much, and he has something to see. Yunyu started shouting. But suddenly they said that there were more important things to do. The kids started screaming again. They woke Nana up. Everyone begged her forgiveness. Doi started calling for her baby. She said her busty aunt was a loudmouth. Yunyu apologized. Yunyu said that it was strange for Doi to call Kazamachi Papa. It is not written anywhere that dragons and humans can have children, especially since they are hatched from eggs. Doi replied that it was only because Kazamachi was very fond of Jaju and Nana. No one understood anything. Yunyu roughly understood the reason why Kazamachi was being secretive here. The presence of dragons in the case changes a lot. Doi said that Yunyu shouldn't care because it was protecting them and their children. Kazamachi hit the girl lightly on the head and told her not to go too far. Kazamachi knew that Doi seemed to understand that Yunyu was worried about him, but he didn't understand why she was so hostile. He decided that maybe they didn't get along. Yunyu didn't understand any worries in children. Siki knew what was about to happen. Yunyu didn't understand why Doi was talking about Kazamachi so easily. Ever since Yunyu became aware of her feelings in middle school, she imagined everything every night before going to bed and was content with just that. But she didn't understand why everything happened so quickly, and so did the kids. Yunyu imagined tying her tie, kissing her when she got home, cooking her favorite dish for dinner, lying on her hands before going to bed. On weekends, go to the park, movies, trips. Kazamachi couldn't understand anything. Doi said that it would do all this. By all means. Yunyu said that it wasn't fair because the girl appeared out of nowhere, always hiding behind children. She thought it was dirty. Doi didn't understand what was dirty. She thought it was cute, and she also said that Nana and Jaja knew exactly who their dad was. Doi asked if Yunyu wanted to steal Kazamachi from these Molotokas and called it really dirty. Yunyu said that with all this, Doi didn't say what she thought of Kazamachi. Many people started looking back at them. Doi replied that she loved Kunpei very much. and she fell in love with him at first sight. Doi replied that she had fallen in love with him since just seeing him once a year ago. Afterward, Doi told Yunu that she was the one who didn't say anything about her feelings for Kazamachi. Yunu couldn't say anything about feelings. And later, another baby woke up. Siki walked over and picked up the baby. Yunu offered to sit down. Doi started shouting and telling Yunu that she had made it clear that she loved Kazamachi. There was no way Yunu could say that. But after a while, she screamed and said that she had always loved Kazamachi. The guy stood there in shock. Yunu continued her conversation and said that she loved him from the day he saved her from being bullied, and she couldn't forget him. Even in middle school, she was embarrassed every time she saw Kazamachi. And later she was never able to admit it, but now she's had enough of unrequited love. Doi said she wasn't the only one, and after seeing Kazamachi only once, she couldn't get him out of her mind either. I fell in love so much that I unknowingly laid my eggs, and when Kazamachi saved Doi yesterday, she was over the moon with happiness, and she decided that it was fate. Doi and Yunu looked at each other, with murderous eyes. Kazamachi started calling out to Siki. The girl held the baby in her arms and told her not to worry. After that, Siki-sen said that there was one thing to do, and that's what they all got attention again. Kazamachi himself didn't understand why this happened, but two girls suddenly confessed their feelings to him at once. And although to be more precise, the girls did not admit their feelings to Kazamachi. The guy just happened to be in the kill zone from verbal shootouts. Kazamachi realized that something had to be done. He said that they hadn't bought everything yet, and if they could postpone this conversation for now. Doi thought of the baby's new clothes, and then I went ahead to get some new stuff. Doi was looking at Bunny's cute clothes, and Yunu was looking at Misaka's clothes. Yunu approached Doi and said that the girl's taste wasn't so bad. Doi said the same thing. Kazamachi watched their conversation. The guy didn't understand what was going on. After all, they were just about to kill each other. The girls replied that it was the topic of conversation that had changed from Kazamachi to the twins. But the guy will be around in 1,000,000 years. Kazamachi still didn't understand anything. And then he said that since everyone bought what they wanted, then we can go home. And they'll take a taxi home. After a while, a taxi arrived and Kazamachi decided to sit down. But Doi and Kazamachi were followed by Siki and Yunu. Kazamachi didn't understand why they would also go with them. Yunu replied that they weren't done yet. The guy said let him stay. Doi and Yunu were looking at each other with murderous eyes again. Kazamachi's sister started asking Siki if she would go to the store. Siki gladly agreed, but Kazamachi began to interrupt her and say that he would go better. The nurse did not understand the seriousness of the guy's words and told him that it was better to let him deal with the girls. Siki waved and said that she had the house to herself. Kazamachi noted that the two men already knew each other very well. The babies had a new rug. Kazamachi saw this and asked if they liked him, and later he began to stroke the head. After a while, Kazamachi was already being called girls. Kazamachi realized that it was as if all the problems were disappearing in an instant. The guy brought the tea. Doi thanked him. Just like Yunu. The atmosphere was heavy. Kazamachi asked the girls to say something because the tension in the air was making Kazamachi's stomach churn. Doi said that Kazamachi was her first love. Yunu replied that it was hers too. Kazamachi's skin crawled. Doi went on to say that Kunpei had hatched Jaji and Nana's eggs. He gave her a family when she was all alone. And Yunu said that Kazamachi protected her, even though she cried and suffered from bullying all the time. He saved Yunu when she was weak and incapable of anything. Kazamachi gave the girl hope. Doi replied that even though she knew nothing about him, she had no intention of giving in. Yunu replied that even if Doi and Kazamachi have children, she has no intention of backing down. Doi knew that Kazamachi didn't see her as a wife, and that he was only with her because of Yijung and Nana. Yunu replied that she had always wanted to return the money, but had never been able to. Therefore, for Kazamachi, she is only a childhood friend, and most likely she is just an acquaintance. Kazamachi said it wasn't very much like dialogue. Doi replied that she had something to tell Kazamachi. What she wanted to say was that she cared about the guy not because he was Jaji and Nana's father, but because the guy held a special place in the girl's heart. And Yunu started telling Kazamachi that she couldn't just give up because of his move, and she wanted to express her gratitude to him for how much she cleaned Kazamachi, and how much she wants to be around him. The guy looked at the girls and accepted their answers. Doi replied that they live together, and therefore the advantage is on her side, and the time spent together will only increase. And parenting is even stronger for Doi and Kazamachi. Yunu said that no one knows this yet, because during cohabitation, many mutual shortcomings are revealed and Doi should be watched as if Kazamachi did not hate the girl. Yunu said that the girl couldn't even imagine how much she had learned over the years. Kazamachi didn't understand why the girls were fighting for him. And although this dream of any man does not bring a little joy to the guy, on the contrary, he only has a stomach ache. Someone started calling Kazamachi's name. The guy immediately responded. Yunu asked if she could come to his house sometimes. The guy just nodded his head. Doi replied to the girl that since this was the case, she could give in, because she was very sorry for Yunu. Yunu thanked Doi and told the girl to watch, so that she wouldn't want to. Kazamachi begged for Siki and his little sister to come back quickly. After a while, Siki started shouting that they were home. My brother went to take the groceries to the kitchen. Doi wanted to help him. Yunu too. But Shohei replied that they would only get in the way. Siki laughed and told Kazamachi that he must have done a good job. The guy looked at Siki with indifference and said that everything is always fun for her. The girl replied that it was true, because she had never seen such a fun exchange in her life. The guy asked her if it was any of her business. Siki replied that of course. The guy replied that only with babies he can relax. Siki replied that such arguments should be handled like a man. Kazamachi was all ears. Siki replied that she should have told them that there's enough Kazamachi for everyone, or something like that. The guy didn't understand what else this image was. He said he didn't look like a killer. The girl stopped bullying Kazamachi and told him that his brother Shohei had become very pretty. The fight was still raging in the kitchen. Siki asked me to give Shohei to her. Kazamachi replied to the girl that let her ask him herself, and until he graduated from at least high school, he would not give her a boyfriend. Siki was saying that maybe he would give in to the girl's adult charm and pounce on her himself. Kazamachi asked Siki where he was an adult. The girl told him to stop saying that. Afterward, she told Kazamachi that he had booked a ticket through Sanzu for the trip. Kazamachi shouted to cancel the reservation. But Siki still kept saying that her parents were some kind of martial arts teacher. And then she said there was a cancellation fee. Kazamachi didn't understand what was being asked of him. The guy looked at the little girls and told them that girls are creepy creatures, and he asked them to grow up to be good girls. Kazamachi and the babies were already fast asleep in the crib. Only one Doi was looking at the guy. The girl would touch Kazamachi's cheek and tell him that he had found her. Taught her to love. Gave her such a treasure. Today, the girl was so eager to talk about her feelings that she couldn't restrain herself, and she wants to tell even more about how much she loves Kazamachi. The girl's head was even spinning with love. Doi was a dragon. A heavenly dragon that rules the heavens. She was born the daughter of the current Sky Dragon Queen. Doi lived with them until it was time to grow up. With all her heart, the girl told her kind, but at the same time strict mother. But when her mother left, the girl became so sad that her tears did not stop for many years. My mother's house needed to be put in order by the much-changed heavens caused by the collision of worlds, because it was the queen's duty to keep an eye on them. Although Doi was able to delay the inevitable for 10 years, she couldn't stop her mother. Doi is too cowardly to get lost among the beastmen and lead a normal life like the rest of the dragons. The girl is too afraid of loneliness to throw away this world and go into seclusion. She bought the most basic necessities of life in the netherworld with the money her mother had left her. Hunted prey in the dungeon. And she could feel the girl's heart gradually draining and cooling from day to day. Doi was coming down the mountain to buy clothes. And on that day, she would never forget that moment. Doi saw 2 brothers that day. The older one looked creepy, but he had such a cute smile. That was when he stole Doi's heart. She knew she was asking too much of him. But she still doesn't want to break up, even though it's only been 2 days. Doi imagines that she might lose her boyfriend, and tears immediately come to her eyes. The girl asked God to always be near him. Kazamachi was standing with the officer and talking about the nanny. The officer said that Kazamachi and Shohei would be starting school very soon, and that their father would be busy at work, so Doi and the twins would stay home. Kazamachi said they were discussing it with their father. The beginning of the school term was approaching, and it had been 2 weeks since Doi and the kids had moved into Kazamachi's house. The kids were sitting in a closed place that protected them from danger. The officer asked the guy if they did it themselves. Kazamachi replied that it was true, because they both know how to fly, so it's for their peace of mind. The officer said she'd heard about JJ's case, but she wondered if Nana had learned to fly. Kazamachi replied that she came out of the bath and suddenly flew up in the air, and her face was very pleased. The officer was amazed that they had learned to fly at such an early age. Kazamachi replied that Uncle Alba was as surprised as the officer. The officer apologized for changing the subject so quickly because they were talking about the nanny. The officer said that in fact she was thinking of asking her mother for help. Kazamachi was very shocked by this. The girl replied that her mother had long worked as a teacher not far from here. She retired last month and now has a lot of free time. The officer thought that she would agree to look after the children if she explained the situation to her. Kazamachi was somewhat uncomfortable, but the girl said that it wasn't a big deal since she lived nearby. And also the girl added that her mother apparently also doesn't care, and she has nothing to do, and so at least she won't die of boredom, so they didn't have to worry about it. Kazamachi replied that he couldn't ask for it for free and would rather consult with his father. The officer said that her mother does not often see children, so the payment is not fundamental. However, without it, Doi and Kazamachi would be completely uncomfortable. The guy said that no one really helped them before. After losing their mother, the three of them had somehow survived to this day. But even that wasn't easy, so in this situation, any support will be useful. Kazamachi also thanked them for their help. The officer said that she would talk to her mother herself, and then she would call how to arrange everything. Kazamachi asked Doi if she agreed with this. The girl nodded her head. Recently, Kazamachi had noticed that she had become quite shy, although there was no stopping her from arguing with Yunu. The officer said that in this case, she returns to the service and leaving, she did not forget to thank for the tea. The guy apologized for leaving the officer without a snack. The girl replied that she wasn't really supposed to take tea either. Kazamachi thought about Doi and how it would have been different if she was his age. And then the guy told Doi that he was going to see off the officer and asked the girl if she could look after the children. Doi answered naturally. The officer told me to say hi to my father and Shohei. Kazamachi said that he would definitely pass it on and then thanked the girl. After a while, the car drove away. Kazamachi stood on the street and stretched. The little girls made such a mess yesterday that Kazamachi didn't really get enough sleep. Shohei came out and asked his brother what he was doing. Kazamachi greeted his brother and said that he was warming up. Shohei told his brother not to suffer from bullshit because it's a shame to look at him. Kazamachi told Shohei that there wasn't a soul on the street. Kunpei asked his brother if he had gone to the sale. My brother, with a smile on his face, said that he went and brought toilet paper and milk. The brother praised the guy and asked if he had taken anything else and where the rest was. Shohei replied that he wasn't a fool to buy something that wasn't on sale and told Kazamachi to eat at least this much. Kunpei saw his little brother as a real householder. Shohei wanted to ask Kazamachi something, namely whether he washed things. Kunpei apparently forgot about them and pretended not to understand anything. Shohei was angry. After all, he asked for everything to be hung up because the weather is just right. Kazamachi apologized and said they had a guest. Shohei started shouting and saying that Doi's little sister had also been home all day. Kazamachi didn't understand why his brother was so angry. After all, houses are at home, but someone also needs to look after the children. And it seems Shohei and Doi are still not used to each other. Kazamachi didn't know what to do. Doi walked over to her younger brother. She really wanted to help him with dinner. Jaja and Nana were sleeping, so the girl thought about it and decided that she could help. Shohei replied that the scorched yard was enough for him. Doi replied that he didn't know how else to do it that time. And even more so, it was only a week ago. Shohei gave Doi the meat and asked if she could just roast the meat. The girl replied that she would do it easily. Doi went to the courtyard. Shohei didn't understand why she was doing this. The girl came out and pointed her finger at the meat, and then fire came out of that finger. Doi brought the meat to Shohei and Kazamachi. Kunpei began to say that there were only coals left of the meat. Shohei has kept Doi out of the kitchen ever since. It can be understood their garden then almost burned to the ground. The girl said that she was very sorry and would continue to do everything only with her own hands. And then she again began to ask Shohei to let her help him. The guy sighed and gave Doi an apron. He said he would teach the girl how to use a knife first. Shohei gave a small one because a girl can be killed accidentally. The brother replied that they were going to make a salad and asked the girl not to cut herself. Doi replied that such a knife is no worse for her than a nail file, and even if something happens, the wound will heal very quickly. Shohei realized that the girl was a dragon. Doi said it was the one. Yua. Kazamachi looked at Doi and Shohei and realized that they were doing a good job and he could relax, and later he began to feel sleepy. Doi told Shohei that it looked like Kunpei was very tired, so he fell asleep with the little girls. My brother replied that he wasn't used to it yet and that he should rest. Doi replied that she hadn't noticed that she had fallen asleep during the day, so Kazamachi kept an eye on the children all the time. Shohei realized that he shouldn't have snapped at his brother about the laundry. The little girls would sometimes cry out and Kazamachi would calm them down and tell them that their dad was there. Shohei told the girl to hold her hand like a cat's paw. The girl showed as her brother approved. Kazamachi knew that this phrase was exactly the same as what his mother used to say to Kunpei as a child, and he used to say to Shohei. Shohei explained further to the girl and said that when she got the hang of it, she would be able to cut a cup like this. But for now, it's best to start with the halves. You need to make an incision and cut it out. DLI did and decided to show Shohei. The guy said it wasn't bad for the first time. Doi asked if she could cook Kazamachi. Shohei said that he fed the whole house until Shohei started 6th grade. The girl was very surprised by this. Shohei replied that he was not a very good cook. Oversalted soups, headdressed scrambled eggs, and fried fish were generally half raw. Kazamachi lay there and listened to all this. He was surprised that his brother remembered all this. But the younger brother said something, and he knew how to cook stew. Doi replied that she would like to try it too. Kazamachi said that stew is his favorite dish. He constantly begged his mother to cook it. I was looking forward to dinner and always followed the process closely. As a result, I watched so often that I learned to cook myself. Shohei also said that there were also cabbage rolls, although they immediately fell apart and were more like a soup with meat and cabbage, but it was still very tasty, despite the appearance. Shohei said that Kunpei cooked a lot of things, and even if he was often not very good at it, they always had an incredible amount of fun doing it. Doi noted that her brother really likes Kunpei. My little brother said it was true. Kazamachi was saying that Doi shouldn't have asked, because Shohei was too stubborn lately. The younger brother said that Kazamachi is stubborn, stupid, kind, and clumsy, and because of this, he constantly gets into trouble. But at the same time, he always tries for the sake of others, so the brother cannot be angry with him. Doi pondered Shohei's words. His younger brother had said that Kazamachi might lose his temper.